You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome to another Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Scott Hambrick. We have Matt Reynolds, and today we have Jordan Stanton, who looks super youthful.
Yeah, and like jacked and yoked. I don't like interviewing people more jacked than me. That's not okay.
I got a haircut just for you, too.
I know, that's good. You got rid of that fro.
We could turn his camera off.
No, it's good. You look great. You look lean,
Thank you.
jacked, looking good. So,
Matt,
yeah.
I want to resolve to do better.
On what? Everything?
I'm just trying to do better, man.
Like more joyful person?
I'm just trying to do better.
Okay. All right.
I've been having a hard time, and I've been doing worse, and I'm just trying to do better.
You know how people have like postpartum blues?
Mm.
You have post-retirement blues. That's what you have. Or post-working blues.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think that's what's going on?
No, this is a further extension.
I don't think you're aching to go back to work. I just think that you've turned into like my curmudgeon-y Grandpa Dick, God rest his soul. So the guy's been dead for 11 years. I just assume that if I came home, that if I just walked into your house at any time, you're either reading articles, listening to a podcast, or watching some sort of show that's basically about how humanity is truly awful and the world is going to hell in a handbasket.
Well, I had to sell the business because that process was already well underway.
So, Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Jordan's going to bring some joy to your life today, Scott.
Well, I just want to do better. Jordan was a practicing nurse. I'm sure he still has all of his credentials, but he left his job and opened a gym in his home, which flourished, and has opened another full tilt boogie real live strength based gym. And he is also the president of the United States Strengthlifting Federation. And we've got so much good stuff to talk to him about.
Surprisingly difficult to say that. I mess up my own acronym all the time. I end up throwing a bunch of S's in. Yeah. USSSFF.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't come up with that. You bought into it at least.
That's
so
correct.
You don't have to take the blame for the name originally, though.
It's like a social justice organization, US San Francisco.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I
San
think so.
Francisco.
I'm sure that was the intention behind the name.
I love the United States Strengthlifting Federation because we press, and because the judges don't mess with our lifts, and because the rule set is rational. Tell us what differentiates your federation from all of the clown federations.
Absolutely. I'd say you hit some of the biggest highlights. One of them being that there's no commands, because why does there need to be commands? Why does a judge have to participate in your lift when it's just as easy to tell the lifter, hey, I just need you to show control at each level of the lift? Then they don't have to be listening for it, and they can focus in on exactly what they're doing, which is just performing the lift, right? Maybe it makes sense for a bench press, I guess. If you're going to pause the bench press, maybe you need some sort of indication to go up. But again, as you said, we don't bench press either. We do the overhead press, which creates some problems, but solves some problems as well, right? As we all know in powerlifting, the bench press is sort of a hot topic because we're seeing these extreme arches and tiny ranges of motion. And you start to wonder, is this really a contest of strength, or is this some sort of freakish mobility exercise or some sort of yogi practice going on now instead of actually just raw pressing strength?
I've got a rule for determining what's a proper arch and what isn't. So you arch up, and if a mouse can run under your back, but the cat chasing the mouse can't, it's good.
It's okay.
That's it.
That's the kind of stuff they come up with in Muskogee, Oklahoma.
That's right.
In fact, they usually involve some sort of animals. So, yeah, the commands are an interesting thing because the first time I heard that coming out of a powerlifting background like you, it's heresy, actually, is what it is. And so before we even talk about the press, this lack of judges' commands was a thing that when it was first being discussed in the very early, even pre-strengthlifting days, I thought, no, that's not okay. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, wait a minute. How many times have I watched a judge screw something up because, you think about, and you have, and I have for sure, I've judged scores of meets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you see literally hundreds of lifts in a single day. And on a lift like the squat or the bench press, so a squat where you actually have to give the person the command in traditional powerlifting to squat or to rack it or to press And really that press command on the bench press is the one they screw up. And you just daydream for a second or two, you've literally ruined the person's entire attempt, right? Or you forget to tell them to squat, or you forget to tell them to rack it, or you tell them to take it too early, or whatever those things are. And so when I started thinking about it, I thought, now, wait a minute. If the rules are clearly stated in the rule book as to how you're supposed to perform the lift, and that's exactly what you do in strength lifting, but it's also really what's being done in powerlifting, right? Now, certainly there are some rule books that could probably use some tweaking in powerlifting, but in general, the rules are stated. We know what the rules are. You know, whether they actually force you to break parallel in the squat, every federation on the planet says you have to break parallel in the squat. Why do we need somebody to say, squat, let you go down, you come back up when you think you've broken parallel in every federation, and rack it? Why do you need a squat and a racket command? If you know what the rule is, and as a judge, you can just watch and say, did they follow the rule?
Mm-hmm. Not just a judge, 3 judges.
3 judges. Did they follow the rule? Yes or no? And you're good to go, right? And then I love that a lot of the USSF meets use the light box, which won't turn on the lights until all 3 judges have thrown their vote. So you can't be influenced by the other judges, right? So
absolutely.
You always tended, my experiences in a lot of powerlifting meets is you would tend to have one weaker judge who would sort of look at the other 2 judges and get an idea of which direction they were going to go. And then they would just kind of follow along with the thing.
Absolutely.
You want independent thinkers here. So the thing that it's made is it's taken the judges' human error completely out of it with strength lifting. I love it. It runs so much faster and so much smoother. And the judges just can, they get to vote. And you got to get 2 out of 3, just like you do in powerlifting, right?
And think about that example you gave too on the squat. I mean, if you wanted any command on a squat, you'd want someone to tell you when you hit depth and to come up.
That's right. I want an up command.
But no, we don't trust you to know when to start and when to put it back. Everything in between is fine, but somehow those are the 2 that we need to inform you of what to do.
Yep.
Right. And another good example is the deadlift, the down command on a deadlift by a head judge. Who's in the worst position possible to tell you that you locked it out?
That's right. Who can't see that your hips, whether they're an extension or not, the guy looking from the front.
Exactly. And he's the one to give you the down command. And it's still up to you to complete the lift. If you put it down before you've locked out, 2 reds from the side judges, and he just ruined your lift.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's really interesting. I love it. God, I love it. You know what else I love about the USSF is that we don't use knee wraps. And here's the thing. I like knee wraps. I'm not anti-knee wraps. I actually enjoy, in the years that I competed in powerlifting, I enjoyed training with knee wraps. But as soon as I started running meets and being a head judge of meets, knee wraps were far worse than squat suits and bench shirts for geared powerlifting, for making the meet go slow. Because inevitably you would have one set of knee wraps that 4 different guys were using, and they would always somehow end up following each other in the flight. And so one guy would squat and be done, and then he would come over and then he'd take his knee wraps off, and the other guy would start putting that guy's knee wraps on. And I'd give him a warning, like, look, you can't do it. You get 60 seconds. That's how long you get. So I love that you can wear knee sleeves, but not knee wraps. It just makes it go so much faster.
And as you know, I mean, I did my last competition actually in knee wraps too. So I love knee wraps as well. They're a lot of fun to play with, but you're right. They slow the meet down tremendously. And for the lifter, it's really a lot more stressful. Any meet I've ever done in knee sleeves is so much less stressful to have to deal with. And essentially too, is we're trying to create as few of divisions as possible while still making fair competition. Because if you've ever been to some of the other federation meets, there's equipped, and then knee wraps, and then knee sleeves. And there's just so many divisions that by the time you're done, you're not competing against anybody at all.
That's right. That's right. Raw with wraps.
Yes.
Like, wait a minute. And then single ply suit.
And then
double ply suit. Multiply plus.
It's crazy. Multiply plus.
We have a bionic division
drug
soon.
tested, non-drug tested, right? Teen, junior, open, masters, master 1, master 2, master 3, master 4. So like in every single time you go compete, and that's what's so funny is the first time somebody competes in powerlifting or strength lifting, they're always real concerned about winning. They're like, do you think I can do okay? Like, oh, you don't understand the point.
Injury free is okay, man.
Literally no one cares if you win a powerlifting or strength lifting meet unless it's literally like IPF Worlds. Then people care. But that's it. And we're not talking to people who are going to IPF Worlds. We're talking to people. That's another thing I love about strength lifting. Strength lifting is a very lifter-friendly organization. it's certainly competitive, but it's more about setting your own PRs and being supportive and encouraging of the other lifters. And so if you're somebody listening to this, you're like, man, I've been lifting for a while, I'm terrified to compete. Strength lifting is a great place to get in because even the judges' commands for a beginner is very nerve-wracking.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What you should be thinking about is lifting the weight. And instead you're thinking, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a beginner squatter get red lighted on their squats because they missed the rack command. They beat the rack command in the squat or the bench press, right? Because you got to have a rack command. You stand all the way up and you rack it. And if you beat the head judge by a quarter of a second, it's all red lighted. And I'm like, damn it, I forgot. Well, like who trains with rack commands is stupid. So I love the USSF because it's so lifter friendly.
Let's tell someone who hasn't been to one of these meets or hasn't competed in one of them what the heck they're like. What are they going to expect to see?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a one-day event, right? And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, more a little later, but that there's no pre-weigh-in day where you have to show up to wherever it is a day early, have to stay the night because you have to weigh in and register first. So you actually get to register that morning, which is really nice. So you show up, you register, you set your rack heights. There's going to be plenty of people there to help you.
So hold on, let me slow you down. So
yeah, go ahead.
You show up, you don't have to weigh in. You go to usually a check-in table and you're like, hey, my name is John Smith. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, great. I got your card, John Smith, because you've already paid your registration to do the thing. They've got a card. They usually hand you your card. You walk over to the platform. There is usually some sort of, does it have to be an ER rack or what are the specifications?
It just has to be an adjustable rack of some kind that they can quickly go between heights. But ER rack is a good example.
It's the standard kind of rack. And most people are lifting out of a squat rack. They're at home. They're not lifting out of an ER rack. So you got to walk over and you figure out what your rack height is. And there's usually a couple guys or ladies standing on the platform and they're adjusting rack height for you. And you can get in the position, you can take a couple shots and go, okay, like this is a good height for me. They'll say, okay, that is 11. So you tell them you want your rack height at 11. Do you go in or out? Do those two? I can't remember if ER racks are in or out as well.
I mean, you certainly can. It depends. I think ER racks you can, and then one of the Texas Strength Systems ones you can, yeah, but not all of them.
And then you walk over to the head table, the MC table, the announcer table, and you put down, you have them usually fill in your card on your openers. And here's the hard part about USSF. What's important about these openers?
It's important that you open a little bit easy.
Yeah, but I'm talking really about the numbers. What's the difference between what the rest of us are doing?
1 kilo increments.
Oh, and the kilo increments. I was going to say they're all in kilos. Everybody competes in kilos, but we have 1 kilo increments as opposed to 2.5 kilo increments.
The Southern Powerlifting Federation does not, in fact, compete in kilos.
Seriously? They're in pounds?
Everybody in the South, listen, anybody south of the Mason-Dixon line, I guarantee you competes in pounds. There is no such thing as a kilo anything south of the Mason-Dixon line unless a kilo of cocaine washed upon the shore on the Gulf of Mexico somewhere. They compete in kilos. Right. So we compete in kilos, but there are always charts at every one of these that I've been to that give you your conversion. So if like, hey, I need to open my squat around 225, you can see what that is and say, okay, well, that's, what is 225? About 111, 112, somewhere in there. Is that right? No, that'd be 231.
101.
100, 101, 102, right? And so, yeah, so you put down your openers. Walk us through that process and then how many attempts you get and what that looks like.
Okay, so you set your openers, and if you're smart, you set them a little too light because you're going to be nervous, especially your first squat.
How many attempts do you get?
So you get 3 attempts at each of the lifts. Once you've set a weight, you're not allowed to go back down. So if you accidentally set your opener too high, unfortunately, you're kind of stuck with it. So each weight must make an increment of your choice on upwards.
Or you can stay the same weight if you miss, right? So if you open your squat and you open too high or you misgroove it or screwed up, you can take a second attempt at the same weight. But what you can't do is go down. That's a big deal.
That's correct. That's correct. And so just like most federations, we work in a rounds system, meaning that you're going to be split into flights, flight A, flight B, flight C, depending on how many competitors. And you're going to go through flight A's first attempts. Everybody does their first attempt. The bar keeps increasing until we get to the last person's first attempt in that flight. And then we go back and we do everybody's second attempts. And then we go and do everybody's third attempts. You move on to the next flight and they do all their attempts before eventually moving on to the next lift, being the press and then finally the deadlift.
So a flight is a pool of lifters that lift together at a meet. And a meet could be anywhere from one flight. A flight is usually somewhere between, say, 10 and 20 lifters total, right? Could be as small as maybe 8 lifters. And you start getting up around like 16 to 18. That gets to be a pretty big flight. So somewhere in that ballpark. You may even have rules. You have rules.
We actually have rules, yeah. So we cap the flights at 15 lifters.
Okay. Yeah.
And if there's flights that are under 10 lifters, there are rules in place to add additional rest time. Because my experience in one of my first, it was a strength lifting meet before USSF actually existed. I think there were only 7 people in my flight. I had to pull 575, 625, and 650 all in like 6 minutes of time.
I don't want to be the guy that always has the one-up story, but I got a one-up story for you.
What do you mean you don't want to be that guy? The Matt Reynolds one-up show.
In the very first USF meet, which before it was an actual federation, when it was an invitational at Wichita Falls, I was in the first one, and they did those not in the round system. They did it like Olympic weightlifting.
Oh, no.
So on all 3 lifts, I was the last guy to open my squat, and I followed myself on the squat, I followed myself on the press, and I followed myself on the deadlift. So I had exactly 60 seconds between my first attempt and second attempt, and 60 seconds between my second attempt and third attempt. So what I did was I actually took all 3 attempts on squat, which was crazy. I thought at least somebody would be in there to give me a 2-minute spell or whatever. On the press, I just pressed my first and second and passed on my third. On my deadlift, I took my first, called for my second, let the time go down, walked up to the bar as it got to 5 seconds, got ready to set up for the bar, and then right before the time went to 0, I said, pass.
Mm-hmm.
And then they reset the clock to 60 seconds, and I stepped back and got another 60 seconds to breathe. And I walked up and did it again. So it really sucked.
Absolutely.
So I followed myself all day. So I did 3 listener. I did all 9 of my attempts following each other, which sucks. So yeah, that round system works really, really well. And most Strengthlifting Federation meets usually are 2 or 3 flights of lifters. That's pretty standard, right? 2 or 3 flights. It's pretty rare that it goes 4 or 5 flights. And it's fairly rare that it's only 1 flight as well. So most of the time, you're talking about somewhere in the ballpark of like 20 to 40 lifters in a day is probably pretty average. And so then when you have that, the other thing I like about the USSF is that I have been to many powerlifting meets that took 16 or 18 hours to do. And I don't know that I've ever been to a USSF meet that took longer than 6 hours or so to do. Nationals a couple years ago, before you were the president, it was a very long day, the one in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a ton of lifters. Not only did they have flights of lifters, I believe they had the females lift. Don't quote me on this, but I believe they had all the females lift first. So they had multiple flights of females lift. Yep. All the females did all their squats, and they did all their presses, and they did all their deadlifts. And then the meet was essentially over, and they basically started an entire new meet with the men.
Yep.
And so it was really like running 2 meets in a row, and that was a very long day. But other than that, they run really, really quick, really smooth. And so we've talked a lot about the advantages to the lifter, but there's also a massive advantage to mom and dad, wife, kiddos who are coming there to watch you. When they come to a powerlifting meet, they got to sit through 12 hours. And you lift about 4 minutes the whole day, that makes for a long day for them.
Absolutely does.
In a strengthlifting meet that, tends to run for 4 hours, it's a lot less sitting around. It's a lot less boring to run those through, and it makes it nice on both sides of the spectrum.
And I feel like there's a very optimal amount of time to lift. You get those meets that are too small, they kind of move pretty fast and the energy can be low. As you said, you get the meets that are too big and talk about the energy getting low. Like it's hard to watch hundreds of lifts in a day for everybody, the judges, the spectators, even the lifters. Everybody's exhausted.
Yeah.
While we may have some big meets, especially the national level meets, because, we want to get a lot of people involved, all of our local meets are going to be much more reasonable than that.
Sure. Oh, that's great. I love it. So what are the things as you took over the presidency and the ownership of the USSF that you wanted to put in place? Nobody comes in buying into a business or becoming a new CEO or new president or new chairman of board or whatever that doesn't have sort of a list of things that they're looking to do that they think they can improve on. And so what are the changes you've made over the last year as the president and owner of the USSF that you feel like has taken a step in the right direction?
So I picked up the USSF about 9 months ago. And at that time, it consisted of a very bare bones website, an Instagram with a few photos, basic Facebook page, and some basic membership platform that actually didn't even track legacy IDs, in that the IDs would change every time someone would purchase a new membership. So there was a lot of groundwork that still need to be laid. And so I think step number one was to get a functional website. Functional meaning it actually tells you what we do, where you can do it, allows you to sign up for a membership that stays with you. And then most importantly, it needed a database. Every single event that was taking place was only really held against that event. There was no records being held. There was nothing comparing one event to another event. And so we got the database. To be fair, it had already been started and was in progress before I picked it up. But we kind of sped that along and got that going right away. That was number one. We needed to get a website going. Number two, we needed to engage our followers a little bit because they had been being neglected for a while. So we got the Instagram going. One of the great ideas I stole from one of your staff was to create a community tab. And a community tab allows people to submit their lifts to us. And if they submit their lifts and they look like they passed, like they followed the rules, then we put those out on our Instagram page and our Facebook. So it's a free content stream while kind of celebrating our lifters along the way. So that sort of got our engagement with the people going. Next on the list for me was we needed some support for our meet directors. Our meet directors that we had at the time had already done other kinds of meets, and so they were familiar with the process. But in order to bring on new people, we had to kind of tell them what to do. Why would we want everybody to reinvent the wheel every single time for every competition when I could put in all the groundwork on a meet director portal, which is in place and working very well, with all the necessary items possible? And so I spent a bunch of time putting this together. I think it's probably one of the most comprehensive of any federation. I bring on a new meet director, they get access to the portal, and now they have ways to advertise their meets, a complete, clear description of how exactly to run them, and just resource after resource that teaches them how to do that. And so we actually ran a meet recently in New York with Ina, and Ina was the very first person that I've taken from kind of beginning to end, having never really run a competitive meet before, to running a fantastic meet. She did an amazing job and put together something superb, and everybody immediately was already asking, when's the next meet? When's the next meet?
Yeah.
So we got that in place. The logo, it needed some kind of branding. We needed something for people to connect with. It just had some initials before, so we got the logo. I think it turned out really nice. I'm pretty happy with it.
Did you use our guys? Did you use Tension for the website and for the logo, for both?
I did the website myself with David. I'm not going to say his last name. I'm going to butcher it. So he helped me with the website. And then for the logo, that was your guy.
These are our Tension guys. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Who do a fantastic job.
Yeah, they do.
Actually helped me with my new gym too.
Oh, awesome. For the website there. Yeah. So yeah, Tension Group and Josh and the team over there does a great job they've done all our websites. Scott, they did yours too for OGB, right?
Yeah, stop advertising them. I don't get enough of his time. Knock it off.
The guy's busy. He does a good job. So here's a little, I don't know, maybe it's a self-deprecating secret that I've figured out in this field. You and I running these relatively successful businesses in the fitness industry is that I like, you just don't have to be very smart to make it better than everybody else. Like if I'm going to create a business that competes with SpaceX and Amazon space program, whatever it's called, I got to have a whole bunch of really smart dudes, like IQ 200 level guys. But if you're competing against the the average powerlifting federation, and we're not on powerlifting. You and I both love powerlifting. We have a love for sports. As a matter of fact, I want to talk about that potential for powerlifting in your future as well in the federation. But it's just done so poorly. The standard has been so bad for so long that you can be the best and the most convenient, and on some levels, you're probably the cheapest or one of the cheapest
We are
in the country, that it's like you're just murdering everybody only 9 months in. And I think this is going to be a force to be reckoned with, based not just on the fact that it's really, really fun and it's just a great thing to get into, and you focus around celebrating PRs, which is what it's all about. It's not about, snorting ammonia and blasting Pantera and slapping each other in the face and doing this stuff that's not really attractive to your average middle-aged person. But you've run it with such organization, and it's run like a professional organization because it is a professional organization, and most aren't, that it's actually it's that idea that when there's not much cream to rise to the top and you're cream, it's an easy ride up there,
Where's this metaphor going? Knock this. Let's stop right now. One of the big problems, though, is unlike the powerlifting federations, there are no ashtrays. And I don't know what we can do about that.
I'm going to tell a story. One of my guys I actually still train to this day. Actually, I'm going to use his first name because one of my best friends. His name is Don, but that's all I'm going to say about his name. He, back when I owned Strong, I coached him, and he did his first powerlifting meet, and he would go out to the parking lot. He was so nervous. He said he smoked like 2 packs of cigarettes during the meet. Now, Don has given up smoking, hasn't had a cigarette in like 5 years. So, like, I don't even think I'd tell that story if the guy still smoked. He doesn't, but I still give him a hard time about that. I was like, we make jokes about powerlifters going out and smoking cigarettes between attempts, and you're the guy that actually was out in the parking lot doing the thing. And so, you don't see a lot of smoking between attempts at the Strengthlifting Federation competitions.
No, definitely not. But if you saw me at the coaches meet, I was pretty drunk by the time I got to my 3rd deadlift. It was awesome.
Hey, man, Scott and I, when they ask us to do the color commentating at those things, we just bring a bottle of Weller 107 because it makes the color commentating better. So especially True Post is in there with us, and we're cracking jokes, and it's terrible.
It's terrible.
I had half a bottle of Weller 107 going into that last attempt, so, I had a good time.
Is that the one you fell asleep on at the top?
No, that was a later meet.
Oh, okay. I've seen the video of you passing out there at the top of the deadlift. So
yeah, you missed the other 10 seconds of that where I wake up twitching.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a little bit scary. Have you thought about doing a powerlifting? I don't know if you would call it USSF powerlifting. If you did that, I desperately think somebody needs to do a powerlifting meet with no judges' commands.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could figure out the bench press, right? So the squat and the deadlift are easy. And even if you wanted to allow sumo for it, I don't care. Like, whatever, right? So I wouldn't, but I don't care if you do. But you're going to bench press instead of press. I think you could just say, look, the bar has to stop on the chest. It's the same thing as saying, well, it's got to break parallel. Well, how much does it have to break? Any amount.
Yep.
It has to break parallel, right?
Yep.
It has to appear to the eyes of the judges. Now, I realize that the engineers out there are going, well, like, if it descends and then ascends, it did, in fact, stop at some point. And you're right, it did.
Right.
But it must appear to the human eye to have paused for any amount of time on the chest and then pressed out, held it lockout, and racked. That's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could do the same thing. Say, these are the rules, right? You could figure those things out. Or you could even give it time limit. You say it's got to be paused for a half second or 1 second or whatever. I don't know that you would need to do that, but you could.
What's wrong with make contact with their chest? What's wrong with that? And then move on.
You could just bounce it. I don't like the idea of bouncing the barbell through your sternum.
Right. And it definitely could be done that it was just touch your chest, but then there's going to have to be some ambiguous rules as to how much is too much of a contact, right? How much deformation of your chest is no good versus good. So, it could be done, but I think a brief pause that you can see is probably simpler of a solution.
Yeah. So have you considered that?
Oh, yeah. 100% considered that. And I think it would probably be a subdivision of the USSF. I think it may be a separate branding, but attached. Using extremely similar rule set. Here's the why it hasn't happened yet. I want the USSF to do everything a federation needs to do, and it needs to do it really well before we go ahead and branch out. So some of those projects, we're still working on, like, we really need another way to vet our judges. And so the judging certification is well underway and should be out very soon. And so that's kind of the last real big project. And then I want this thing running like a well-oiled machine before we go ahead and delve into new services.
Yeah, that's great.
But then, yes, absolutely. I think that's the next logical step is let's do a powerlifting meet with all of our rules and then a bench press. Here's the one challenge that I'm still working through. We briefly mentioned this earlier, is the bench press rules are difficult if we want to somehow attempt those extreme arches from occurring. One solution of the arms being 90 degrees at the bottom, and maybe it could work, but the problem being, how do we measure 90 degrees, right? It's going to be really subjective to the judges. And I have a few examples of people that still find their way to get a 2-inch range of motion out of the barbell.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, if you look at the last few videos we've done on Barbell Logic YouTube channel with my old strong gym partner, William McNeely, that guy's 5, he'd probably say he's 5'5". He's probably closer to 5'3" than he is 5'5". Huge barrel chest, very short arms. He would actually, I think, have to deflate his chest to make sure he got to a 90 degree. You're talking about a 90 degree elbow angle, right? Is that what you're talking about? Or...
I'm talking about the grip width on the bar. So if you grip so wide, you won't have 90 degrees at the bottom. I'm talking constraining the grip width.
Oh, okay. The forearm must be perpendicular to the barbell.
Correct.
Okay, I got
at
it.
the bottommost position, because that limits excessively wide grips
Okay.
and makes it more even between shorter armed people and longer armed people.
And you could go more narrow than that, I assume. You just can't go wider than that.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you take guys that have had rotator cuff problems or whatever and want to close grip the thing and say, well, it's just going to make your range of motion longer, so there's no reason that you can't do that.
Yep. And it's a small solution. It definitely limits it a little bit, but it gets a little ambiguous judging at the bottom. You know, was that 90? Was that 91? I'm not sure, right?
Well, and it doesn't change the fact that if you've got some, especially some female who's been in gymnastics for 17 years of her life and is uber flexible, and the rule is still shoulders on the bench or traps on the bench and butt on the bench. And again, not only can that cat run after the mouse up underneath her arch, but the tiger can run after the cat also underneath the arch. It doesn't fix that problem either.
Correct.
So that creates a little bit of who knows what you do with it. Yeah, you're right. You would have to define that for sure.
So there's a few solutions that people have done. So feet flat on the floor certainly helps.
Yes.
Buttocks touching, not hamstrings. A lot of federations count the hamstrings, and that allows huge arches.
Yep.
I suppose those things certainly could be helpful, but then anything after that is kind of inelegant.
So let's talk about the weigh-in on USSF. How is it different from traditional powerlifting?
Yeah, so we do weigh outs. Actually, following your final deadlift attempt, you go with one of the officials and they weigh you out as opposed to weighing you in. Now, that's awesome because it means that you compete at the weight that you weigh as opposed to the weight that you weighed 24 hours ago. There's a lot of really big advantages to this. Advantage number one, it's a lot safer.
Sure.
Right? I've done that weight cut from 242 to 198.
Whoa.
First of all, that's an incredibly dangerous weight cut, right?
Sure.
Two, you don't want to compete against me lifting 250 pounds when I weighed in at 198, right? Because I'm better at cutting weight than you. Some arbitrary skill that doesn't mean anything.
Means you're mentally tough and you got brass balls.
And then the other thing that it does is it makes the events one day.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, that can't be understated how awesome that is. You don't have to show up the day before. Your meet director doesn't have to have the gym closed the day before. How much simpler is it to close your gym on a Saturday only as opposed to have to close it earlier and get ready for 24-hour weigh-ins, right?
Now, I want to clarify a rule about the way out. So the way I understand it is that the second you finish your third attempt, you walk over to the head table, to the MC table, you get your card, and you are then escorted by someone. Females are escorted by females, males are escorted by males, to a private room where then you can weigh in with as many or as little clothes on as possible.
Correct.
But you are not allowed to go to the bathroom between your third attempt of deadlift and the way out. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So one of the things I do, so here's a pro tip, kids, that I've told all my clients are the second they get done with their second deadlift attempt, I make them all go to the bathroom to get that better Wilks score. Do you use Wilks still? Yeah, so you're using that Wilks. And that's just a coefficient, right? So the idea is if you went purely based on body weight, like who lifts the most X times their body weight, we know that the lightest weight people would always win that, right? There are lots of guys that weigh 155 that can, well, let's use powerlifting because it's easier and we won't use strengthlifting there. So there's lots of guys that weigh 155 that can bench press double body weight, that could bench press 310.
Yep.
A 310 bench press at 155, that's a strong bench press, but it's not a world-class bench press.
Mm-hmm.
There are not a lot of guys that weigh 255 who can bench press 510.
Yep.
That's a whole nother deal. And so there's a coefficient that's applied to your body weight that tries to make it as even as we can to figure out who the overall winner is across all weight classes. And so that's why you weigh in. And then so you're going to compete against both people in your weight class who weigh in the same, about 12 to 14 pounds, somewhere in that 12 to 18 pounds, somewhere in there in your weight class, like within, 20 pounds or under. And you'll also compete against everybody else in the entire meet based on the coefficient, right? So, So pro tip is go pee or more, but usually definitely pee after that deadlift, right? I also make my lifters stop drinking after the press ends. I tell them, okay, no more to drink once you start your deadlifts. And it's not because it's a dehydration thing. It's that at that point, the extra water in your belly as you start your first attempts deadlift isn't going to help you at all. It's only going to hurt you on your coefficient. And if anything, it's going to make it a little harder to get the air in. And one of the hardest things to do on a deadlift is to get that big breath in at the bottom of deadlift anyway. So, yeah, it's good.
One of my favorite rules in our federation, just safety for the lifters, convenience for the meet directors, and really even convenience for the lifters themselves. They don't have to think about their weight. They're not really allowed to, right?
That's right.
Yeah, this is probably the safest of the federations because of not just the way in, way out distinction, but also no commands. And you have to control the bar in and out by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody can try these super aggressive squat attempts because they have to get it out by themselves and get it back in. So it's kind of self-limit to make sure that no one's overly aggressive or doing anything stupid. I think, though, for safety's sake, we should squat from the bottom up. So you take it off the pins, lock it out, and then lower it back to the pins. That would make sure it was even safer. It would still be a good judge of ultimate strength. But
can you imagine if you did that, you realize your hips would be higher than your shoulders when the bar broke off of the pins? That would have to be like one of the rules. Like your hips would have to start lower than your shoulders when the pins break off the ground, or your ass would be up in the air and you would just good morning the thing up.
You go in the morning, you set your pin height, but it's what it is. It's the where the bar is and your hip crease is below parallel. And you have to squat it off of the pins.
Have you done below parallel pin squats before?
Yeah, damn it.
It's amazing how hard they get from the bottoms up, especially, right? You're talking bottoms up are crazy. That's the other thing. And it's another day for another discussion. But the idea of stretch reflex, we know we use a lot of those supplemental lifts to break up that eccentric concentric chain. But don't tell me there isn't still the stretch reflex, even when we pause the thing.
Absolutely.
There is, right? There's been studies to show that it's 3, 5, 7 seconds long, right? We know if you put the bar on the pins and you walk up underneath that thing and you try to get tight and stand the thing up,
forget it.
Versus you go down and pause for 10 seconds on the pin, I promise you can still squat more going down and pausing 10 seconds on the pin.
Yeah.
You can. There is something going on with like being able to maintain tightness and stretch, and maybe it's not all just stretch reflex, but it's, I know you and I have both talked about this before, Jordan, that when somebody does a pin squat, the goal is to let the pins take as little weight as possible. You keep as much weight on your back as possible because otherwise you get loose underneath the thing. So, no, it's great. I love the rules of the USSF. Every year they get tightened up a little bit more, a little cleaner on things like the press. You deal with some of the similar sort of situations as like a big arch on the bench press, or with the press, you got this thing where it's like, look, the rules are the knees have to stay locked. And so everybody knows that sort of press 2.0 or Olympic style press, like they used a classic type press like they use in the Olympics, if done properly, something that you saw, like say Serge Redding do, as opposed to Alexiev, who clearly did a sort of a push press knee kick.
Yep.
You're not allowed to knee kick in the USSF, but you are allowed to use your hips to get the bar moving, and you are allowed to let the bar come down before it goes back up a little bit. So there's a little bit of bounce in that upper body as well. And I know there was a lot of discussion this last year over can the bar stop on the way up? Can it actually, if somebody does a layback, can it actually come back down a little bit and then go back up? And so there was a lot of discussion. One of the things I love about what you're doing is you've got an advisory panel that isn't like illegal. It's not like a board of directors that you'd have at a big like C corporation or anything. You're just like, look, it takes a lot of the pressure off of you to say, look, I've put a bunch of people that I respect in here and they're giving input as well. And we sort of vote on this thing and talk through it. And there's good dialogue and debate until we figure out what the best option is. And then we have a whole nother year to test the thing out. And then we can clean it up a little bit more in 2020. And then we'll clean it up a little bit more in 2021. And like you said, eventually you'll get to this piece that everything is just sort of firing on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
And you can start to expand and scale. And it's pretty exciting.
What is the new press rule?
Yeah, so we actually did a pretty big leap in rules on this last set, really cleaned things up a lot. And we had to make some adjustments on the press. One of the rules that absolutely had to go was the bar starting and ending at the same location. Because the bar never starts and ends at the same location, right? Because there's this thing called momentum that carries it down further when you come back down. And why can't you put it in a front rack position to go ahead and put it back, right? So that kind of got everything started as to we need to look at this and we need to change and define the start position, because the start position was never defined.
Right.
So we talked through with the advisory panel a lot and then came up with the most solid solution being, let's not put a restriction how high you can put the chin, and let's just make sure the bar starts under the chin motionless. So if it starts under the chin motionless, I don't care where it ends. I have a definitive start position and the end just has to be back down. And I felt like, and actually it's already been proven in these first few meets that we've done this year, it is so much easier to judge now.
Yes.
There's so much less that you have to look for. And some of the worries were, if you let them raise their chin as high as they want, aren't there going to be people that are just basically pin pressing their presses, right? So I took a whole group of people. I took a bunch of my lifters. I took a bunch of people well known in the USSF like Chase and Brent and some of the best cheaters of the press possible. And I told them, you can put your chin as high as you want. You can start the bar as high as you want. Tell me, give me an advantage. Did you get an advantage? How much of an advantage did you get, right? Almost universally across the board, everyone reported that position feels terrible, and I lost weight on the bar. The only person that got a PR out of it was actually me, who was the strictest presser there possibly could be. And I got like 2.5, 5 pounds out of it. That's it. Why do some arbitrary constraint when the most that one person gets is 5 pounds, right?
Yeah, if you think about it, it's that idea of, it's like doing a rack pull with the weight 2 or 3 inches off the floor. If you've ever done that, you never pull as much, at least not the first 6 or 8 or 10 times you do it, as you can deadlift, even though it's a shorter range of motion, because you're not compressed. You're out there in what I call no man's land. And it's the same thing too. If I lift my chin as high as I possibly can, I start the bar 2-3 inches above where I would normally start it up high. My forearms aren't pressing into my bicep. My triceps aren't pressing into my lats. Nothing is tight. I'm just out of there, and I'm in no man's land. So that's why a pin press from that position is so damn hard, right? You get a pin press up above your head. Now the range of motion is so short that the trade-off is such that you can lock anything out. But you try to do a pin press from your mouth, from your nose.
Yeah. Which you programmed for me for like a month straight.
Because I just want the best for you, Scott. Then it's hard. It's really, really hard because you're out there. There is no tightness. And these guys that have learned how to use that tightness to their advantage and get some rebound out of their upper body, like I said, let them use it. It's fine. Like, it's part of the deal. Like, we're not going to let you use your knees, your quads. You don't get to knee kick. You don't get to push press the thing. We're certainly not jerking, right? Your feet must stay where they start. So where the feet start, that's where the feet have to stay, and the knees don't get to unlock and relock, right? And the weight, we decided, I say that because I'm on the advisory panel, one of the things I remember we discussed was that the bar cannot go back down. It can stop.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you'll see that a lot of times with a layback, somebody who presses real hard and it kind of stops momentarily as they're laying back, but it doesn't go back down and then it keeps going back up. That's an awfully hard thing to judge. And it had been, you're judging like, well, did it stop? I don't know. It was really, really close. It kind of almost stopped. Let's red light the thing. And one of the things I noticed before you were president that I would argue about was, man, some of the very best presses in the meet, I mean, it was exciting and I wanted to celebrate it, would get red lighted because you would have this quarter second, half second momentary stop of the bar going up. It wouldn't come back down. It would just stop as they kind of laid back a little bit and then would start going back up. And I thought, wait, look, if the bar goes down, not okay, right?
Yep.
But as long as it stops and keeps going back up. And so I like the changes you've made. I think it makes it easier to judge. I think it's better for the lifter. I think it's a little more forgiving for the lifter and without cheating, which is not, without crossing the line into something where you're like, that's not really so.
Yeah.
With the rules of the USSF, there's very little gamesmanship that can be done here, with the arch in the back of the bench or whatever. It's just you and gravity and the barbell pretty much here with the way out and all of those rules. It just makes it quite an objective measure of your strength on that day. And I think that's wonderful. I've been to a whole bunch of these meets and the atmosphere is always friendly. The culture in these meets is probably the greatest accomplishment of the USSF, I would say. The rules are great and they're run very smoothly, but the culture around these meets is the best thing about them. Everyone's friendly. There's almost always some meat mom at these things that brings cookies for everyone.
There's almost always an after party. We all go get food and pizza and beer and whatever and get to hang out.
Lots of kids.
Yeah, lots of kids playing around. That's true.
It's fantastic. And how would they email you if anyone had any questions?
usstrengthlifting@gmail.com.
Bam. Listen, you guys, even if you don't want to compete, by the way, you probably should, go to the website, check it out, see where all the meets are, and find one near you and go watch. You don't have to stay the whole day. Most of them don't even charge admission. If they do, it's just going to be a few bucks. Go watch and see how this meet plays out. Go cheer on your peers. There are people there. There are going to be little kids there that are going to be squatting 47 pounds. They're going to be older people. They're going to be great, big, strong mastodons. Everyone's there and they're all giving it their best. Go and see what that looks like and cheer those people on and start to get familiar with that community. And you just watch. You go to see a meet and you'll be in one 8 months from then. Almost guarantee it.
I was asking Brett McKay the other day, what the next meet is he's going to do. I asked him, hey, do you want to do powerlifting? Because his bench press is pretty good. He thought about it a little bit, and then he came back and he said, you know what, man? I just think I only want to do strength lifting meets. That's a pretty good spokesperson to have Brett McKay from the Art of Manliness say, like, the only ones he's ever going to compete at are USSF. And so, the guy loves them, and he's certainly a guy that's very conscientious, and he believes in what you're doing and the professionalism with which you run your company. And man, you've done a great job.
Thank you so much.
Will there be music at Nationals?
This has been discussed, by the way, in the advisory panel quite a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I think that was the first rule that I put forth, right? Is we need some music. So yes, there will be music at Nationals. It will be run quietly, but it is there because it keeps the energy of the crowd up.
It will all be Soviet era Russian language
cool.
male choir.
That's what it should be. It should just be Soviet, like Eastern Bloc music or bagpipes. You could just alternate between bagpipes and Soviet Bloc stuff. Eastern Bloc stuff would be great. What we talked about is it's not going to be offensive and loud and intense. But you're right. The silence, the dead portions of a meet between lifts are often a little awkward, and to have a little bit of music in the background makes a big difference for sure. And most of the lifters have earphones on anyway, and they're wearing those earphones. They're listening to their own music right up until the last second before they step on the platform. They throw them out and do their thing. So, it's a blast. You guys should go. Listen, we've done lots of shows already. You can check. We've got lots of Barbell Logic podcasts, as well as on our YouTube channel that Jordan did for us on the advantages of competition, getting ready for your first competition. Scott and I have walked all through those before. Jordan did the same thing for us on the video. So if you want to get the short form, 3-4 minute version, check out those first, and then you can check out the long form. And then we've also done quite a few articles on the website as well at Barbell Logic. I wrote one on how to prepare specifically for the USSF. And then Nick Solin, who's written a lot of articles for us, has also done some articles about preparing for your first meet. So we've got lots of content out there. Just do it, man. So just get online, pay that registration. Nothing will make your training better than signing up for a competition, because it makes you have skin in the game. And Nassim Taleb would be excited about every single person that signs up for the thing. As a matter of fact, we should reach out to our good friend Nassim and say, let's get him into a Strengthlifting Federation meet. If Taleb said, hey, I want to come show up and only do a deadlift. By the way, I want Sybil to just do a deadlift. So it can be exhibition.
Yeah.
One of the things I said, like, look, I just want her to come out. Like, she can't squat because she's got double hip replacements and double knee replacements. And she can't press with a barbell. She presses with dumbbells. But she can deadlift for sure under, normal specifications and can get white lights. And so she's 83. She's pushing for a 175 deadlift. And so, that's a pretty damn good deadlift for an 83-year-old lady who's, basically, extra, aftermarket parts put on. And,
well, there is another Barbell Logic podcast. Thank you so much, Jordan. You are doing a really good job on that. And we all needed someone to do that. So thank you for doing that, man.
Yeah. Thanks, dude. You're doing a great job.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on.
Go out to the internet, go to usstrengthlifting.com. And go check out that schedule and go to a meet near you. I know that you're listening to this probably thinking, that ain't for me. I'm not going to meet. I'm not going to compete. But just go watch one, and don't say you're not going to compete till you go see one. Go check it out and see what it's like.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Watch one first.
Go watch one. Go in there and watch the attempts. Go in the warm-up room. Talk to some of those people. They're just like you, and they need you there too. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.